Welcome to my solar addiction. Today's video,
F08 fault on Sol-Ark 15K.
All right, guys, a real quick video. Before Hurricane Francine hit the New Orleans area, I was in the middle of making some videos for you guys, and I had kind of taken my system apart and pulled the rack batteries out so I could do some testing on just the 3 wall batteries, which I'm gonna probably release that video in the next day or so. Because I wanted some longevity data on how long it would run my house, so you can kind of see that, because to me that's more important than can it start a giant air compressor, because I don't use a giant air compressor. I use my house. So I'm sure a lot of y'all feel the same way sometimes when you see these load tests. But I'm doing this video because as the storm's approaching, I was trying to do some last minute notary work. I'm a notary. It's one of my businesses. But I got back to my house. I'm like, let me put these other batteries back in case the power goes down. I want to have even longer time without the grid. And before Hurricane Francine hit the New Orleans area, I was trying to connect my EG4 LLV2 rack batteries, connect them back up to my system, because I had disconnected them because I'm in the middle of incorporating my 18K PV that's up on the wall already, and then I'm going to put another one next to it where that window is, which is about to become a parallel 18K setup. But I've been running on the 3 Power Pro wall batteries as part of a video I'm working on them. And then the storm is coming, so I'm like, well, let me hook all my batteries up so I'll be ready for when that grid goes down. And first we ran into a problem of I was getting a fault on my batteries, but we found out, surprisingly, that it was caused by this little wire, right there, that's disconnected now from my shunt, and my Victron shunt was underneath one of the bolts on the negative terminal, so it was causing the battery to think there was a short. And once I got that wire from underneath that negative connection, it was no longer experiencing that fault. But then I ran into the Sol-Ark F08 fault. So if we look it up in the manual what the F8 fault is, it says GFDI relay failure. Check for continuity on the inverter's neutral and ground. Ensure that there's only one neutral to ground bond in the system. Current leakage from inverter AC output to ground. Check ground and neutral are connected at the main panel. I was blown away by the fact that I even got this fault, because first of all, I didn't touch anything to do with grounds or neutrals, anything on the AC side. All I was doing was adding my batteries back to the connection for my rack batteries to the main bus bar, which is not even in the box inside the inverter where, all the connections are. So I hadn't even touched anything in there. So the first test they made me do was he wanted me to disconnect all the grounds and the neutrals and make a jumper between the neutral and the ground to create a ground neutral bond, and there should only be one. And if I got the fault light after I restarted the system with that, then it would be an internal problem with the actual inverter. So if you're not sure if it's something external to the inverter or internal to the inverter, do this little test. Disconnect all the grounds and neutrals on the inverter that's showing the F8 fault, and then do a jumper and restart the system. It should clear the fault unless it's something wrong internally with the inverter. So I did that, it cleared the fault. So now we were trying to figure out what changed in the grounds and the neutrals. So the next step was to slowly add back each one of the grounds and neutrals to the inverter so that we could figure out which one was causing the double bonding situation. Well, as I was going to put them back in, I noticed that the mechanical lugs on the two connections for the neutral wires that are internal to the inverter were loose. And I asked the guy from Sol-Ark, I said, well, could this have caused the problem? He goes, maybe. So we tightened those up, put everything back the way it was before, and it solved the problem. And that was caused, after talking with Sol-Ark for a while, trying to figure it out, by a loose connection on the neutral bus bar. And it wasn't any of the connections that was done on the AC side by my electrician. I had to use an electrician for the AC side. I did the DC side of my system because I do have a grid tie system originally, and I have an agreement with the local provider, so it had to be done by a certified electrician. But if you look in the back, there's two connections with the white shrink wrap around them. That's on the far right, two connections on the bus bar in the back. One of those was loose. And like I said, I never touched it because I'd never had to. I wasn't the one that installed the AC side because of code. Once I tightened that up, restarted the system, no problem. So if you run into a F08 fault on your Sol-Ark, I would definitely check to make sure that all your neutral and ground connections are really tight and to torque settings in the book. Okay? So I would suggest, as part of your regular maintenance, I kind of blame myself on this. I didn't do the AC side of my system because I started with a grid tied system and I added batteries and more functionality as it progressed with developing my system. So because of code, I had to use a electrician that was certified to do the AC side because of my grid tie agreement with my local energy provider. So I couldn't do that side, and they did that side. Personally, I would tighten every lug on the machine before I even started installing it. I should have done that. I should have tried to tighten the two neutral internal connections before anybody did anything. But since I didn't do the AC side, I didn't really think of it. Lesson learned. So if you're having the F8 fault, first thing I would try is tightening everything up, ground and neutral. If you haven't changed anything in those sections of the inverter connections, then it's probably a loose connection. Okay? Good thing the storm wasn't as bad as we expected. Francine didn't have a big back end. We did get hit with the front end of it. It was a Cat 2. And the power never went out. So I really didn't need my system. Even though I was running on one inverter, I would have had enough power to run everything but my central air if it did go out. But then after that, I got everything back up and running. So it wasn't a big deal. Here we see the image of the ground and neutral bond connected that I made, the jumper. It could be any gauge wire. I just used some grounding wire I had laying around to make that connection to make sure it wasn't an internal fault. And if you look in the back right on the neutral bus bar, which is the one at the bottom, you see the two white, the two connections on the far right. Those will go to the internal connection on the inverter, and those were the ones that were loose. Okay, so it had been working for almost a year like it was, and either they got loose over time or they weren't tightened up to begin with. But tighten those puppies up when you do your maintenance.
Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed our video.